syllabus. Any questions about it? The exam dates are on it now. Not time or place, but the dates. And when we get more information about it, we'll have it posted. Yes.
First class, you said that the second critical paper was being moved. Is it October 16th or 23rd?
No, it's October. In here, it's October 30th. Yeah, because October 23rd is a break day, fall break, so it'll be the week following. All right. Any other questions on it? Yes.
We talked about the critical paper and students.
Okay.
Like
The final paper.
no, like reflection paper.
Oh, the reflection paper.
Critical paper that's due next Tuesday.
All right. We want you to put your own thought and mind into it in connection to the videos, the class lectures, the conversation, and the readings up to date. So essentially, a multiple conversation that you carry on. I would like to see that you would put into the paper your challenges to the notion of nonviolent struggle and theory, because you've been largely raised with those on the American scene and the Iraq War and so forth and so on, police force and the rest of it, all of which is conventional wisdom in the United States. So I want you to raise those issues as well as we go along. We would like to see to what extent you understand something of what nonviolence is as over against violence. I would hope that you would recognize that there ought to be serious questions in this country, in this world, about the efficacy of violence, which simply is not working anywhere in the world effectively, not even in those states that are pretty tyrannical and all. And here we're filling up our jails and so forth and so on now. That's a direct challenge to any kind of democratic society, all right?
Do we have to use all the class materials, or can we focus?
All of the what?
All the class materials, like all the reading and movies, or can we focus in?
No, I don't know. I'm not going to say that you should use all. No, I won't put that on you. But let us know that you are reading. Let us know that you are wrestling. Is that clearer? I think we call the papers a reflection paper, or what did we call it? A critical paper or a reflection paper? Well, sometimes I call it critical and sometimes I call it reflection. Yeah, okay, and I haven't done either one. But in any case, it is a critical paper, reflection paper, creative paper. All right, any other questions on that? Okay, one of my ambitions for this class is that you will wrestle seriously with nonviolence. Theory, practice, methodology, all of which we will be covering. Yes, sir.
Sorry, I do have a question. Can
Yeah.
we use first person on this paper? Are we supposed to use first person, like use our own reflections, or?
You can.
Okay.
Yeah. You can if you wish to use first person. All right. All right, so let's begin our conversation this evening. Any other questions on that now? On the syllabus or the papers and all? The dates should all be on the syllabus. The dates that they're due should be on the syllabus. Now, you should be working on what kind of a project paper you want to do. I think you will notice that I have pushed the idea very firmly that it should be on the women's movement, 1910, 1917, or 1920, on the working families movement or labor movement, 1933, 1950, and then the civil rights movement, 1953, approximately 1974. Should be concrete. It can be connected with any particular campaign or struggle that went on there. It can be a biographical sketch of someone who strikes your fancy from the readings in our conversation. It can be an analysis of where nonviolence and violence got involved in the same issue or in the same campaign, and therefore a critique of what that means, or what that meant, rather. Choose a topic in which you are interested, a topic or event that may help you in your further studies. So something that in your research and reading will be helpful down the road. Yes?
Do you make parallels between these movements and other movements in history, in modern history?
Excuse me?
Can we make parallels between the movements you just said and other historical movements or modern movements?
That can be done in a small way, perhaps, but not in any major fashion. The three movements I've lifted up and will be lifting up more are the movements which, in my mind, changed the consciousness of the nation in a very critical way and caused a political realignment in some fashion, caused the political parties and political leaders to become aware and to make some basic decisions about the country. And while that has happened on a smaller scale with other things, it hasn't happened on the scale of the 20th century that so affected the quality of life of the average person in the United States. The wealthy and the powerful, they get their share regardless of what era, recession, or prosperity, or wartime, or peacetime. They care for themselves, and many of them know how to do it. But, for example, the lifting up the standard of life in the United States, health care, education, and so forth, that's really depended in the 20th century on three basic movements. And then the other part of that thesis is that the 20th century the 21st century will have to repeat it and do it again. That's my political analysis. Yes.
I'm wondering if it might be worth to take a second and talk about the Agenda 6. Maybe some students here don't know what happened down in Louisiana.
All right. Any other comments in that final paper? All right, let's take a moment and look at is it Jenna or Gina?
Gina.
Okay. Huh?
Gina. I've seen it a lot on YouTube and stuff.
Yeah, well, that's what
I don't think it matters how you pronounce it. Some people from Louisiana say Jenna, so I guess it really just depends on your accent.
Okay, all right, good. Then so either pronunciation is correct. All right, who wants to sort of lift the issue up for the whole class?
I have a news article like on my laptop if you want me to read that. I mean, so it could be like that.
It's off the front pages now because of the O.J. Simpson arrest. It was beginning to get some coverage until when? Sunday? Then there was none yesterday, and I don't think of course, I don't listen to television news and so forth and so on, or radio for the most part. But it's pretty much not where it was coming up to Saturday.
You can do it.
Okay, my impression of it was that there was apparent racism on the case of the DA, Gina, and there was a tree outside a high school where white students would congregate, and as a protest, a group of black students went out to hang out under the tree, and the next day when they came out, there were 3 nooses hanging from the tree, and a few days later, a fight broke out between a group of white students and a group of black students, and the DA is now prosecuting the black students for second-degree murder.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the DA has had some fairly disturbing quotes.
He said he could end their life with a stroke of a pen.
There's also a bus going down there tomorrow.
There are 3 or 4 buses so far. I'm not sure how many. Beg pardon?
I have a little more information.
Okay. Well, that's the nub of the story, except that you did not end it with the fact that the white boys got basically a slap on the wrist, and the black boys, who were 6 of them, all hauled into the court and charged with 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 charges. There were a whole slew of charges lined up. Yes.
Did people die?
Beg pardon?
He went to a party. He was hospitalized for 2 hours and then went to a party. The same day.
Yeah.
You can get charged with murder if no one dies.
No, no one died.
Oh.
No one died. One boy was slightly knocked out, I understand, but he was up and about within
And the blacks
minutes.
were charged as adults.
Yeah, that's exactly. Thanks for reminding.
Michael Bell has been in jail since September 2006. I think it was just this week, or last week, they brought him down out of the adult court and they're trying to juvenile court now. But it's still wrong because the fact
That's
that
right.
he shouldn't be getting charged with that. But they did bring him down to juvenile court. That's just 1 out of 6 so far.
Yeah.
So there's everything that they're facing.
Right.
In prison. For trying to defend themselves while they were getting jumped.
All right, that's the nub of it. And I do not know who's organizing it, but they are apparently expecting thousands of people in Gina on Thursday, is it? And there are buses leaving here tomorrow evening, Nashville, and so far quite a number of students are on the buses. They'll leave it.
They said it's a prayer the boys you can wear black on Thursday.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments? Beg pardon. Yeah, this is what they're calling for. Yeah, they're calling for. But it's Louisiana. I did a nonviolent training for about 100 people last night at Fisk on it, and they do expect that there will be counter demonstrators there. They may not be. My wife tells me this morning they won't be, but I don't know. But there could be counter demonstrators. There could be a lot of yelling, noise. There will be provocateurs.
People are pulling out, like bus companies are pulling out of transporting people from Nashville to Dallas. I'm sure it's probably happening in other cities as well. Some bus companies are pulling out, and they call the National Guard to be ready in case something breaks out.
On the alert.
So it's getting pretty big.
Okay. All right. So it will be the hope by the various organizers. I mean, I do not know nationally who's doing this, but the hope is it will be a nonviolent demonstration.
There's an organization called the Color of Change.
Beg pardon?
I believe it's an organization called the Color of Change. It was like sponsored the whole demonstration rally. And I know that the NAACP is also taking part think if I was to change the actual organization, is him and all up.
And where are they located?
As far as location, I'm not really sure.
Uh-huh, okay.
Their website is colorchange.org. If anybody wants to go on there for more information or if you make a donation for the
Right.
Jesse Jackson, Sharpton.
Yeah, the whole slew of people, Spike Lee, and I have not seen a list, but a whole range of people. It's going to be an all-day demonstration from 10 o'clock in the morning till 2, and then from 4 o'clock until 6 or 7, the different rallies. But the larger picture is that this kind of thing is going on in many different places of the United States, but gets no press coverage. The attitude of the media is that racism is a thing of the past. You hear no political discussion of it, even with the presidential election coming up. The violence in many communities that is fundamentally racist violence is not being watched or accounted for, and the practice in the criminal justice system is that young black men, also young Hispanic men, also young Native American men, go to jails in South Dakota or Gina, Louisiana, for behavior and charges that their counterparts in the white community are not often charged for and then do not go to jail. Yes.
I'm in a sociology class called Prison Life, and the statistics are showing that at the rate that black men are going to prison, by the year 2020, 63% of black males ages 18 to 30 will be in prison. At the current rate.
Yeah, and the American Express and other companies have discovered that there could be profit for investors in private prisons. So these are being made, and my governor in California has sent the first shipment of prisoners from California to a private prison here in Tennessee. So this is part of the picture. All right, let's thank you for bringing that up. And
Anybody wants to get involved, please come to the
here is a notice on the board of doing some action.
Should we bring anything other than wearing black?
If you want to make a sign, bring it, that's fine. But other than that, just your voice and enthusiasm.
You can also go to the NAACP website and sign the petition that actually gets sent to state representatives and everything. So it's not like I can just go out there and hold a sign. You can do something legally to help the process as well.
Yes, the NAACP legal staff has been called into play, and they're the ones who took the case to the Louisiana Appeals Court.
And Color Change also has a petition on their website for the governor.
Of Louisiana, who's a Democrat. All right. Anything else on that case? So let's move on then. All right. As of now, what are your questions? What is your thinking about violence, nonviolence? Where are you? What are the issues that you see? Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Go ahead. Sorry. And give me your name again, please, so that I can try to remember faces and names.
Joe.
Joe. Okay. What's your last name, Joe?
Hills.
That's right, Joe Hill. Right.
I was having a discussion with somebody the other day about the draft, and we ended up getting to World War II and talking about nonviolent means, like how the Danes were able to prevent problems.
All right, Denmark.
But in America, it would be the American people couldn't necessarily stop the Germans through nonviolent means. It was kind of up to whoever the Germans were occupying to use nonviolent means to actually stop them, because it seems like unless someone is in a position of power over you, you can't, or unless they are dependent on you in some way, you can't actually affect them through nonviolent means. And so I was wondering, like, how could America, or how could a country on the outside help the people on the inside to overthrow a dictator or something like that?
They can work for the UN and have sanctions. Stephanie, I'm sorry. They can work for the UN and have sanctions.
All right. All right. I want us perhaps not so much to deal with nonviolence in place of a war. Okay? I'm doing that quite deliberately. Although there are books on civilian defense through nonviolence. And Gene Sharp, who was mentioned in A Force More Powerful, and who's in our bibliography, which the graduate students are to read, lectures almost annually at a number of the military colleges, Annapolis, West Point, and war colleges in the United States and elsewhere. Has been a consultant for Sweden and Switzerland on civilian self-defense through nonviolent means, or civilian means is what sometimes it's called. So there is work. We're at a stage in the study of nonviolence where in a sense we're really just beginning. It is not acceptable in the history books yet. So major campaigns have been and are excluded over the decades. Slowly, folk are waking up to recognize that that in the 20th century, nonviolent change has been the more effective change. The CIA, the U.S. Institute of Peace, the State Department, the National Foundation for Democracy, all funded by federal government, has supported nonviolent instructions in places like East Europe in a non-communist day, in Serbia in the year 2000. They helped to finance it. In the video we're going to show tonight, Chile, some of the folk who were trying to create opposition to Pinochet consulted our State Department, who in turn showed them some of the demonstrations and movements in the United States that helped to effect change, and as they then were organizing for 1985 in Chile. So there is a whole literature that is developing about war and so forth and how to help. When we come to South Africa, that story in the text, in the book, indicates the extent to which the international intervention by sanction and divestment by companies, the university students who demanded that Stanford no longer have investments in companies that had investments in South Africa, a whole pattern across Europe and the United States. So indicates very clearly, Bishop Tutu and Nelson Mandela maintained that it was the international work of sanctions then that pushed their drive for self-determination over the top, made it inevitable against the apartheid government. The apartheid government at that time was the fourth or fifth largest, most technologically sophisticated military in the world. So something like that. It may not have been fifth, it may have been sixth, but it was way up there high. All right, yes.
I wanted to ask something more on like a theoretical level,
Okay.
kind of thinking about with like nonviolence. How much is the like nonviolence, I guess, analysis or the way to practice the theory of it relate to maybe like non-exploitative means of like change? Because I feel like you could use methods of nonviolence to do like bad things as well. So how much is like the theory about focusing on maybe like progressiveness and other like good things?
Everyone hear that question? No? You need to maybe stand up and do it and speak back that way.
I was just wondering how much the theory of nonviolence relates to methods against exploitation. Like how much is like the theory involved in nonviolence for good means? Because I know Martin Luther King, and a lot of things I read, he's very focused on like a love for humanity. And,
All right.
like, he wrote a lot like about the Greek agape or whatever, and how it's like a love for humanity, and how much of the theory of nonviolence is about promoting like non-exploitation over exploitation.
You get it? To what extent nonviolent theory moves against exploitation of people and perpetuating injustices in various forms. And it has to be said that, from my point of view, nonviolence is not nonviolence if it is on the side of tyranny or on the side continued exploitation. Therefore, as an illustration, the United States, Great Britain, together after the Gulf War of 1990, joined to get the Security Council of the UN to impose sanctions against Iraq, put an embargo upon goods flowing into Iraq, especially including medicine and things for children and the rest of it, and so that in that decade, the estimations are that from 500,000 to 1 million children died as a consequence, direct consequence of the sanctions. Their medical system was basically destroyed on what some people would call nonviolent sanctions. So there is my thought, and we'll get to that place one day in the United States, where Jack Duvall and Peter Ackerman and I will really do some fierce debating over the issue of, does the nonviolent business and theory support the notion of a non-humanistic assumption in relationship to people? Does it permit for demonizing the other side and the opponents? And Gandhi and King would say that it is not nonviolent if it encourages the demonizing, the hatred, the isolation, the shunning of some people, those that you are opposing. This is one of the dangers in the book, or one of the questions that I have in the book. Now, I think the book is excellent. I wish I had it in 1958. Wonderful. So I welcome it and cooperated with it greatly, and I still do. When Jack Duvall or someone from that group calls me about some matter, I try to do what it is that they want me to do. So I think it's a great, huge resource. But there is a danger in the notion, in the book, that you do not have to operate in nonviolence from a religious stance. That is in the introduction of the book. Does anyone remember reading it? Let me get the page number for you to look at it more carefully. Page 7. It's a good sentence. Not the popular mind has persistently held unto two misconceptions of nonviolent conflict. Since the centuries, two most celebrated leaders of nonviolent movements, Gandhi and Martin King, emerged from religious callings, nonviolent action has been stereotyped as a moral preference rather than a pragmatic choice, thereby obscuring its strategic value in conflicts. Now, I think that in and of itself is a good statement, but the notion that you do not have to have religious calling for nonviolent struggle should not imply that you do not have to have certain humanistic values in life that you think are important, whether you call them religious or non-religious. You don't have to be religious to have values of compassion or a sensibility that all of us human beings are in the same boat. And unfortunately, many religious people have decided that all human beings are not in the same stream of life or in the same place or plight. And that they are special, and folk who are not in their camp therefore are not special and perhaps even inferior. But nonviolence does require humanistic understandings about life and about struggle, whether these are considered religious or non-religious. And it is true, I will add to this, it is true that many people see nonviolence from the point of view of moral preference and do not recognize the extent to which the movement of the 50s and 60s, Alice Paul and the women's movement of 1917, all insisted that nonviolence was politically the right way to go, was the most pragmatic course, offered options for success that a violent route did not offer. And in our teaching in the movement in the 60s, we reiterated again and again, it is practical, and we also pushed hard in Alabama and Tennessee and elsewhere that it is a reflection of the teachings of Jesus. In that sense, the spiritual religious content was from Jesus and not primarily from Gandhi. The methodological content was the great gift that Gandhi offered, and that was used. Any comments about that? Does that make any kind of sense? David, go ahead.
There's a bit on 108 that is similar. He talks about the bottom of 108.
Yes.
Truth force adaptable to this very worldly goal. Most took part in nonviolent action, not in order to seek some sort of moral transfiguration, but to overcome their adversaries. And I wondered if you found it problematic to speak of using nonviolence, kind of means to an end stuff. With moral transfiguration, that seemed like a more sort of a dismissing way of talking about truth force.
Well, I think that they do not tend to understand religion and the culture in which they're talking about. I think almost without exception, there was a moral base or moral ethos which helped to back up the effort to develop the nonviolent struggle. In the case of Poland, the Catholic Church was very instrumental. Catholic Mass, the priests who participated, the leadership which was Catholic, very much a part of it. In Chile, I don't remember if this video will show it, but the cardinal in Chile, the church was very instrumental in the whole mobilization for the Yes campaign in 1985. So I think they do not understand the psychological, spiritual, moral climate. Some social theorists maintain that no movement will be effective if it cannot address and speak to and lodge itself in the moral, cultural, social ethos of the country where it's operative. And that's from 20th century social thought. And so I've maintained that for nonviolence to work, it must find its common teaching value system in the nation that is where you're trying to effect change. I was asked some 2 or 3 years ago to go to Africa to do some work in the development of a peace university in which nonviolence would be a major theme. And it was a very busy time of my life, but I declined for another reason, and that reason was that I had not done enough reading about Africa to see and feel some of the sources that come out of Africa. And therefore I felt that my teaching would not, my participation would be more limited than what I wanted it to be. All right, yes.
So, with that sentence there, you're saying that it was more that they were taking the Indian people were engaging in like ahimsa,
Yes.
or the Hindu ideals of nonviolence and joining together on a cultural basis as well, more than there was no moral change, it was already there in the first place. Is it the argument? Like they were coming together on like cultural values.
Well, no doubt, sizable numbers of people who participate in some of these movements that we're reading about in the book are there primarily for pragmatic reasons. They reject the notion that the violence will work. But at the same moment, you must not undercut the morality of the country. In the case of India, you had at that time a strongly Hindu Muslim country, but predominantly Hindu. Gandhi was a Hindu. Gandhi very early on was called the Great Soul by the people out in the villages, who saw him very quickly as a saintly figure, which he tried to fight personally. But out of their own Hinduism, out of their own religious development, they saw Gandhi in Africa and then in India as a mirror of Ramakrishna and an extraordinary human being. And a lot of the participation and a lot of the effectiveness was rooted in that ethos. And I think that Peter and Jack have just missed the boat at seeing that dimension. If they mean by this that it does not need to be people out of the religious dimension, and with that I agree, but if they mean by that a certain political, social, humanistic, psychological, moral values are absent, then I say they're quite mistaken. They say a moral configuration did not take place, but I think that when you think in terms of Jawaharlal Nehru, who was the first president and in a very real way became the political son, if not the moral son, of Gandhi's. This man took on a whole different sense of what it is to be political. And that affected his administration as the first prime minister. It affected it so powerfully that as Ali Jinnah and the Muslim League began to push the British for a Pakistan, a Muslim country, and to divide that Indian subcontinent, Gandhi and Nehru agreed that Nehru would step aside as in the leadership of the Congress Party and have Ali Jinnah become the first prime minister of India. Jawaharlal Nehru is one of the extraordinary people of the 20th century, though he was pretty much shunned and panned in the United States because he would not go along with the Cold War and thought that countries trying to shape their own destiny should find a different path rather than aligning themselves with the Soviet Union or with the United States. And that was severely criticized. He was called a communist, therefore, and so forth and so on. But his whole understanding of politics was reshaped by the nonviolent struggle. So I would challenge that that thesis politically. All right, other comments on that? But that still misses the boat of my question. The thrust of my question is, where do you stand in relationship to your own agreement or disagreement with nonviolence theory and practice? And we haven't gotten that far into it yet. Or as you see it in the films, where do you stand? Yes?
Are you asking us whether or not it's like you think it's possible to institute it in America? Is that? I'm not exactly sure what your question is. Where we stand.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm asking, as you move into the 21st century, where are you going to stand in the struggle for equality, liberty, and justice? And how is this to happen? Will you plan to side with those people who think that this is America's issues in the United States? These domestic issues can be resolved by various little bits and pieces of, or various forms of violence. Where will you stand in relationship as you develop families? Will you decide that little bits and pieces of violence in family, verbal or attitudinal or physical, are of value in family stability in the United States? Where will you stand in relationship to that very, very personal thing in your life that most of you will be engaged in? It is a huge disorder in the United States. And when the family value people talk, they talk not at all about domestic abuse and violence. When they talk about family values, you will not see Jim Dobson, for an example, of Colorado Springs, saying a word about domestic violence. But it's very real. So where do you stand in these matters? Violence versus nonviolence. Don't argue it on the basis of war. Argue it on the basis of your own life's purposes. Yes?
Okay, I would just have to say that I've just kind of come to realize that violence doesn't ultimately solve anything. It
All right.
the issue. Because if you solve something violently, then the other side has no part of an agreement or compromise or cooperation. It just harbors resentment and aggression, really. So that's from a pragmatic point of view, not a moral point of view, why I would side on nonviolence.
All right. Pragmatically, you're saying that you sense that violence doesn't solve issues. How many of you are in agreement with that? Anyone know an instance where you think a violent episode or a violent incident did effect some change or affect the problem? Yes, Joe Hill.
I don't know if this would necessarily be good for social movements, but if I see someone getting beat up or getting hit or something like that, I feel like I have a moral obligation to get the attacker off the victim, and I might need to use aggressive or violent means to do so. And I feel that in that case, violence is the pragmatic solution, directly grabbing the person or whatnot, whereas sitting there might not be. I'm not talking about, cops attacking rioters,
Right.
Random unprovoked stuff.
Okay. All right, but what you're saying is very hard to do and can very often get you killed or injured. The police say this all the time. The FBI will keep the statistics on it. If you think that you have to be armed in some way or prepared in some way to use violence to stop an attack on yourself or somebody else, most of the time you're the one who gets hurt. Because the assailant is ready for resistance. And most of us are not practiced in how we can intervene in a fashion that will de-escalate. So this is problematic. For a long time in Nashville and Memphis and Atlanta and a great number of cities in the United States, the domestic quarrel in the city, in the neighborhood, in the community somewhere, in which the police were called, became the basis for an escalation and for a serious injury, if not death. This was very true in terms of the black community. The white police officers go for take the call, and they escalate whatever's going on with their, in a sense, very, very often with their arrogance, with their, quote, manly taking charge. And often that's resulted in greater tragedy. Let me just, before you go on, let me just add to this. In police studies in the last 40 years, they've discovered that women officers going into domestic quarrels use their feeling skills, their listening skills, their skills of staying poised under fire, and are better at quelling the incident and changing the whole mood and walking out of it unharmed, and with solutions opening up in that situation. They've found that even in dangerous scenes where there's an armed person, that women officers have gone in and not pulled their weapon and have disarmed the situation, where crime's being committed even. So these are in a number of studies of the big cities. We're talking here about the very the great difficulty, the complex difficulty of being able to figure out how to intervene without making it explode. I mean, I agree with you emotionally. I see an incident, I want to interfere with it, especially if someone, being pounced upon. But there may be some other ways to do it rather than getting yourself between the assailant and the victim. There may be some other ways to do it. Yes.
Like, what about, like, in cases where there's, like, structural, like, when we talked about racism and sexism in a structural sense, like, we're learning about domestic violence in another class where women will continually go and try to get out of the relationship, and maybe eventually they'll end up killing the person who's beat them maybe for, like, 20 years, and then, like, and then men who maybe kill their wives and after they beat them for years only get a manslaughter charge because they claim, like, and it's like sexist on a structural level. So, like, how do people overcome to use nonviolent means when it just doesn't seem like, I don't advocate anyone killing anyone else, but it's just like, what do you say to someone in that situation? Because of a structural sexism or racism that's holding them down.
Well, can we come back to that? And I won't, I'm going to remember it, and if I don't bring it back up, you can remind me to do so. Structural changes, which is what these domestic movements in the United States have been about. Structural changes have had their best allies in overt nonviolent strategizing and work. That's been the best way to get structural changes to happen. The women's movement that did, with a variety of kind of allies, push the Clinton administration to support the Anti-Domestic Violence, the Violence Against Women Act, that tried to provide money to develop networks, to develop way stations, safe houses, and so forth across the country. That is an illustration of going after structural change, creating centers to do this work. That's the kind of civic activity that we should all be supporting and encouraging at every level, to create the parallel institutions that will, in fact, resist the problem and help to make changes, as well as, in the case of domestic violence, provide the woman with a network of security, of safety, and all. So how many are you at the point where you see where you begin to see a critique, a criticism of violent efforts to resolve issues? Let me see the hands. You've come that far. All right. And that's not accidental. It's something that you know is there. No? Yes. What time is it? Huh? 7:15. Okay. Is there a clock up there? Oh, okay. Someone tell me when it's 7:30 when we take our break. Because apparently this watch is not working. All right. I saw several hands. Go ahead and speak up. Go ahead.
What about in cases of genocide, and where you have a government that's, say, immune to sanctions, is on a racial or religious mission to slaughter a given
Genocide genocide in the 20th century in particular is a concrete cause, a concrete consequence of the continuing push of Western civilization for white dominance, and that white civilization is the best civilization. The arming of people around the world on all sides and giving no serious attention to creating an international law and international climate that begins some of the de-escalations. The arming of the people of the Congo, different rebel groups, Rwanda, Urunda, the arming of different sides in the Sudan today, the building of our military installations right down that east coast of Africa as we expand our hegemony over in Africa with huge resources. The whole spirit of domination of the world and hegemony that has come out of Western civilization primarily in recent times, in the last 200 or 300 years, is a fundamental continuing cause of genocide, and it will increase unless there begins some movements of international sanity that can call Europe and the United States to heel. Now that's a tough statement, and you ought to disagree with it. Because if I made it in certain places in the United States, there would be vast disagreement. But the arming of nations and military groups all around this world is just horrendous, and most of us don't know that much about it yet at all, because so much of it is hidden. There is a genocide that's going on now that is invisible. That is the 20 to 23 million babies who die around the world in the first year of life. That's horrendous. I've seen the figures, 14 to 23 million a year. I said the other day, 200 in the United States a day. Now that's genocide, but that's invisible, except for people who want to see it. It's going on daily, and it's steadily increased in the last 30 years as neoliberal policies, globalization policies, militarization has taken place. Plantation capitalism has moved. Yes.